Good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining me and all of you out there today. Thank you to Amy Slingerland and the Boxwood Alliance for inviting me today. So as Colin said, my name is Naomi Landesberg. I'm a certified geriatric care manager, also known as an aging life care professional. The name of my company is Hudson Valley Elder Care, and been working in this field for a long time, so lots of experience and lots of stories. So today I've been asked to speak about what a geriatric care manager does, what services we provide, how do you know when someone might need the services of a geriatric care manager, and who would benefit from those services. So, and I'll also share along the way some relevant examples throughout the presentation that will help you get a better understanding of the role of a geriatric care manager, or a GCM as we like to be called. We have a lot of acronyms in this business. So today we're going to talk about what is a geriatric care manager and why are we the experts in aging well. But first, a few sobering facts. Okay, next slide, thanks. So this is according to AARP. By 2030, all baby boomers will be older than age 65. This will expand the size of the older population so that 1 in every 5 residents will be of retirement age. And the aging of baby boomers means that within just a few decades, older adults are projected to outnumber children for the first time in US history. So you can imagine there will be a much greater need not only for GCMs, but also for resources and services devoted to the aging population. I'm often asked what a geriatric care manager does, and I think I should have this clever 30-second elevator speech that explains what we do. However, the truth of the matter is there's really no way to explain what we do in 30 seconds. I think the simplest explanation I can give is that I am an advocate for older adults and their families, and I work to find options, resources, and solutions for their changing care needs. That's the simple explanation, and now I'll get a little more granular in detail. So Colin, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what is geriatric care management? It is a holistic, client-centered approach to caring for older adults or others facing ongoing or new health challenges. Through our expertise and experience, we can provide answers at a time when families are in a period of uncertainty, need, and oftentimes high stress, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. What we do helps families to take action and make good decisions that will ensure quality care for their loved ones. So how do we accomplish this? Through a variety of ways, which I will talk about throughout the presentation, including assessment and monitoring, planning, problem solving, and referrals, education and advocacy, and family caregiver coaching. So my goal as a geriatric care manager is to make sure that my clients live their best lives. And that includes in the least restrictive and safe environment. And we work to improve and enrich their quality of life, their independence, their health, and their well-being. So going back to the first bullet on top, how do you know when you need the services of a geriatric care manager? So one of the first things I do is an assessment. So it's very important for me to get to know a client. The better I know them and their situation, the better I can help them. So I do a comprehensive, holistic assessment to identify problems and the need for care services. The assessment is a thorough review of a client's medical, cognitive, functional, and environmental status. So what do I mean by that? So medical is kind of self-explanatory. What kind of medical situations are they dealing with? What are their diagnoses? What kinds of medication are they taking? Cognitive meaning, what is their level of cognition? Do they have any problems with their memory, their short-term memory, their long-term memory? Functional refers to how someone's able to manage their activities of daily living, or their ADLs, meaning how well do they function, in their home? Can they dress themselves? Can they prepare their meals? Can they shower safely on their own? Can they transfer, get in and out of bed, get in and out of a chair? And also environmental status. So where do they currently live? Is that an appropriate setting for them? So those are some of the really important things that I look at when doing an assessment. I also look at financial resources. So if they're going to need care at home or other services, how are they going to pay for that care? And I don't have to tell you, but that care is quite costly and getting costlier. As part of the assessment, I also look at legal documents if they have. And if they don't have their advance directives, such as healthcare proxy or power of attorney, then I will refer them to an elder law attorney, as these are very important documents for us all to have. Another part of my assessment is a home safety assessment to ensure that the home is safe. For my assessments, I find that it's always desirable to have at least one family member present if possible, not only to make the client feel more comfortable, but because it's the first time that they're meeting me, and they would probably be more comfortable having a family member there. But sometimes the client may not know all of their medical history, or if they have any cognitive impairment, they may not be an accurate reporter of information. So it's important for me to get, reliable information. Once the assessment is completed, I'll look at what services, if any, are already in place, and then arrange for and monitor other services that will support the older adult and their family. And this could be a wide range of services, including home care, nursing care, hospice or palliative care if necessary, physical or occupational therapy, transportation services, assistance with meals, help with mail and monthly bills, assistance with hospitalizations, rehab stays, and also discharge planning. And my goal is always to recommend the most appropriate and cost-effective services. So sometimes an assessment and follow-up recommendations are all that a family needs, but sometimes the services can be ongoing depending on the need and what the family situation is. So we also make appropriate referrals to medical, legal, and financial professionals when needed. And we act as liaisons between the client and the family members, other professionals, and facility staff as needed. Oftentimes, a client may have children or other responsible family members that live out of state, and so I help in coordinating care, medical appointments, keep in touch with the family regarding their loved one's condition and status. So for that family that lives far away, the services of a geriatric care manager are really indispensable. We've seen that family members are less anxious knowing that there is a care manager who can act as their eyes and ears and provide professional, objective feedback regarding their loved one's needs. One of the other important things that we talk about during assessment is healthcare, health insurance. So we can also help navigate the complicated world of Medicare and Medicaid. One of my favorite resources in Westchester County is the Westchester County Medicare Helpline, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I find they are always very helpful and knowledgeable. So if you have any questions about your Medicare benefits, don't hesitate to give them a call. In my practice, I prepare Medicaid applications for clients who need mostly home care. The need for Medicaid benefits, both in the community and in skilled nursing facilities, has increased as people are living longer and outliving their resources. And it's very important for you to know that there are only 3 ways to pay for long-term care, whether that's care at home or care in a skilled nursing facility. And those 3 ways are private pay, long-term care insurance, and Medicaid. We also ensure that health insurance, entitlements, long-term care insurance policies are accessed correctly, and that the paperwork is completed fully and accurately and submitted on a timely basis in order for our clients to get all possible aid and reimbursement from both government and private programs. So now I'd like to share some examples to illustrate a lot of these things that I've been talking about and some of the things that you see up on the slide in front of you. So how do you know when you might need the services of a geriatric care manager? So the first one we just talked about, families seeking a professional assessment. So we're going to go to the second bullet, which is if a loved one has, and this really describes, a lot of the population that we work with. If a loved one has multiple medical or psychological issues, or a change in physical, medical, or cognitive status, such as a fall, a new diagnosis, an injury, or a decline in cognition. So I'm going to talk for a little bit about Mr. M. Mr. M is a 65-year-old man who was discharged from rehab after suffering a stroke. He was in a wheelchair, and while we hope he'll be able to walk at some point, that's unclear. The problem was that home for him was on the 2nd floor of a condo with 17 very steep concrete steps up to the 1st floor, which obviously was not going to work for him. So this is a perfect example of the family needing help, not only with discharge planning from the rehab facility, but also where would this gentleman go once he was discharged from rehab, as well as providing for his care once he went home. So this was a challenging case because Mr. M was in a coma for several weeks following the stroke and had to have a guardian appointed, as Mr. M was not able to make decisions for himself. The guardian was responsible for making personal, healthcare, and financial decisions for Mr. M. And one of those decisions was to hire a geriatric care manager. So once Mr. M was ready for discharge, I was able to find him a wheelchair accessible apartment. He also needed full-time care. So I hired a wonderful woman to live with him and provide for all of his care needs and his ADLs, his activities of daily living. So here my role was not only to help the discharge planning from the rehab facility, making sure he had all of the necessary equipment he needed in the home, as well as finding him suitable housing and quality home care. Part of my responsibilities was also overseeing the aid, also making sure that he was seen by visiting nurse, as well as physical, occupational, and speech therapists. Since he was not returning to work due to the stroke, he had to transition from his employee insurance to Medicare. And I was able to enroll him in original Medicare, a supplemental health insurance plan, and a Part D plan for his medication. Thankfully, Mr. M has since made very good progress in his recovery, and he was able to get to the point where he no longer needed a good decision. So that was a very good outcome to this particular case. He's doing very well. So the best time to contact a geriatric care manager is before a crisis occurs. This gives us the time to do a thorough assessment and create a plan of care that can be implemented without the stress of an emergency. I, along with, I'm sure, my colleagues, get too many calls for situations that could have been prevented. Situations like falls, not enough care in place, older adults not taking their medication as prescribed, and family not prepared for hospital or rehab discharge. Generally, we think we have lots of time when somebody goes to the hospital or rehab, but in actuality, those discharges come much sooner than we expected, and we have to be ready for them. This is also the best way to avoid unnecessary or preventable hospitalizations. There are things that I can pick up at an assessment that are red flags, such as seeing spoiled food in the refrigerator, stacks of unopened mail and unpaid bills, things that cause trip hazards in the home, expired medication bottles, etc. So you can learn a lot by spending some time with somebody in their home. So now we're going to look at the third bullet. If a loved one is unable to live safely in their current environment, necessitating care at home or moving to a facility or a family member's home. So too often, as I said, I get calls that an older adult has fallen, perhaps, broken a hip or another injury, or hopefully not. Mrs. B was an 86-year-old woman who was living alone at the time. She had prior mobility issues and was a fall risk, but absolutely refused to have help at home, much to her family's dismay. She decided to go out one day during the winter to get her mail and slipped on black ice and broke her hip. The family knew that she was a fall risk and shouldn't have been alone in the home, but too often the older adult objects to having help in the home, even though a caregiver might have prevented this fall. These are the situations when a care manager could work with the older adult and the family to assess the need and provide the necessary services to ensure that the client was as safe as possible. Mrs. B had to have hip surgery, a rehab stay, and full-time care when she came home, but she was never the same. This is one of those situations that shouldn't have gotten to this point if we were able to put some care in place. Now, that's not to say that falls don't happen even when there is a full-time caregiver in the home, but in this case, I would have hoped that the caregiver would have discouraged Mrs. B from going out to get the mail in the snow and the ice. Okay, so going to the fourth bullet, limited or no family support, or family doesn't live near loved ones. So I'm going to give you an example of family living out of state and how can a care manager help. So one of my oldest clients passed away not too long ago. I had been working with her and her family for over 12 years. She had 2 daughters who lived out of state and but were very involved as much as they could be from a distance. This case was a very time and labor intensive case, as I did pretty much everything for Mrs. Y. I spoke with her daughters on a regular basis, either by phone or email or text. I coordinated her medical care, accompanied her to her doctor's appointments, followed up on medication changes, ordered her medication, managed her full-time caregivers, ordered her food every week, took care of repairs to her apartment, prepared all of her insurance paperwork, paid her bills, and on and on. It's exhausting just thinking about it. So you can see the scope of what a care manager does in this type of situation. Now, granted, not all cases are like this one, but this does give you a good idea of the wide range of services that we provide. So that was Mrs. Y. An example of limited family support. Sometimes family members are not able or unwilling to take care of their loved ones. So this is a little example about Mr. K. So Mr. K lived in an assisted living facility. 2 of his sons lived out of state, and the 3rd son, who lived locally, had a very difficult history and relationship with his father. The local son didn't want to be involved except for his weekly visits and hired me for the rest. So as a care manager, I was tasked with setting up and managing companion services to take Mr. K out of the assisted living most days. He went to the gym, he went to art classes, he went to restaurants, museums, movies. And again, this was all with a companion. I also made all of his doctor's appointments and went with him, followed up on medication changes, necessary tests. I was also the point person for the assisted living facility. So this was a situation in which, even though family was close by, they didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day care and care management of their parents. So Mr. K had a good life doing the things he wanted to do, and the family was on board with this arrangement. So it was really a win for all. So the next example illustrates the need for intervention when an older adult has chronic mental illness and refuses assistance. So this goes back to the second bullet. This is a little story about Mrs. D. So Mrs. D was an 82-year-old woman who had untreated mental illness, chronic depression, and paranoia for most of her adult life. She lived on her own in an apartment. She had stopped paying her rent, her phone, and her utility bills. She was in danger of being evicted, and her phone service had been turned off multiple times. She was also non-compliant with most of her medication. She was constantly accusing others in her building and her children of coming into her apartment and stealing. She wouldn't listen to her children, and one day, I guess it was the straw that broke the camel's back, threatened one of them with a knife. We were finally able to reason with her that she desperately needed help, and she was voluntarily admitted to an inpatient psych hospital for treatment of her mental illness. Now, her children were devastated to think of their mother in a psych hospital, but it turned out to be the greatest gift. Her children were unable to accomplish what the geriatric care manager was able to. So this is a good example of a neutral third party, somebody who's not family, being able to affect change when family cannot. After about 2 months of treatment and a good regimen of medication, we were able to place Mrs. D in an assisted living facility where she remained for about 10 years until she needed a higher level of care. And this was a happy ending story. It was the best 10 years of her life, of her adult life, because she was clear-headed and able to enjoy a better relationship with her children and grandchildren for the first time in a very long time. Okay, so this next illustration talks a little bit about family dissension. So sometimes adult children or other family members can't agree on care decisions. One child thinks everything is okay, and the others see things that are concerning to them, cognitive changes, decline. And we all know that it's hard sometimes for family members to acknowledge that their loved ones are declining. So this next case illustrates family dissension. So GCMs also provide counsel, support, education. Sometimes we get calls when there are family disagreements regarding the care of the older adults. So with an understanding of the family dynamics, we can help to negotiate and work through family conflicts or disagreements that might interfere with the needs or the interests of the older adult. I have a very challenging case where 3 brothers are assisting with the care of their mother. 2 of the brothers are basically on the same page with respect to their mother's care, and the 3rd brother is on the polar opposite side. So complicating this case are legal matters, family not getting along, not to mention a very severely compromised older adult. And I am also working with the caregivers in order to provide better care for their patient. So this is one of those cases. This is an ongoing struggle, and there are no easy answers. So keep in mind that if you do find yourself or a loved one in a crisis situation, it's not too late to contact a geriatric care manager. If an older adult has been hospitalized, has a dramatic change in health status, we can usually act pretty quickly to evaluate the problem and come up with an effective and timely solution. This next example, again, this is going to illustrate the need to take action before a crisis occurs. So this is about Mrs. O. Up until a few months ago, Mrs. O, who was in her late 80s, she was driving, and she was also living with her daughter and son-in-law, and pretty much managing on her own while her daughter and son-in-law went to work. The family had noticed some signs of forgetfulness, but didn't think too much of it. One day, Mrs. O got into her car and wasn't heard from for about 12 hours. The family, of course, was frantic, called the police, and a search ensued. A few hours later, the family got a call from the police saying that they found Mrs. O in her car on the Metro North train tracks a few miles from her home. She was confused, she was disoriented, and she was taken to the hospital. Mrs. O needed a full neurological and physical workup, as well as going forward care in the home to ensure that this would never happen again. So this is a situation where the family started to see some changes, but didn't think it would lead to this. It's important to remember that dementia is not only a progressive disease, but an unpredictable disease. So what may seem normal one day is not necessarily what will be another day. The other thing to keep in mind is that this family was seeing some very subtle changes, and sometimes when you live with a family member, you may not recognize these subtle changes as concerning, of course, until they are in Mrs. O's case. So, Colin, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so a couple of more situations when when you might need the services of a geriatric care manager. So, if an older adult or family isn't pleased with their current care provider, we can help to either work with that care provider or perhaps find a new care provider. Family needing guidance, navigating dementia or Alzheimer's care, there are lots of wonderful resources for that, and we can provide help with those resources. The next bullet, I think I talked about, Very important for folks to have their advance directives, and we can make referrals to financial or legal professionals. If a family has recently become involved with helping their loved one and needs direction about available services, again, we can provide assistance with that. And then if a family member has limited time and or expertise, perhaps they're part of that sandwich generation of caring for their own families while also caring for aging parents and having a full-time job. And then finally, if someone has suffered the loss of a spouse or a partner, particularly if that person was the main caregiver, we're going to have to look to make some arrangements to ensure that that person is now cared for. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so why it's so important to have an advocate. So last but certainly not least, geriatric care managers serve as effective advocates. We make sure that our clients' wishes are followed with healthcare professionals and other providers, and we ensure that their needs, their rights, their safety, and their well-being are addressed and respected. So a little example. Imagine that you or a loved one are sitting in the doctor's office and the doctor just gave you or your loved one a difficult diagnosis. You understandably may be scared, and just when you should be paying close attention to what the doctor is saying, you're still trying to process the news that you've been given and probably failed to hear much of the important information the doctor has told you. So that's when having a health advocate can help. Now, a health advocate can be really, anybody. It can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a GCM, someone who can be with you, can ask questions, can take notes so you can better understand what the doctor is telling you and ensure that you get the care and resources you need. So these are the things, these are just some of the things that an advocate can do. So they can ask questions, they can take notes for patient and family, report back to the family, keep track of medications, help with follow-ups, help arrange for transportation, research treatment options, doctors, hospitals, and of course, help with paperwork and insurance matters. So as a care manager, over the years, I've seen just how valuable it is to have another set of eyes and ears in the home, but it's also important in the doctor's office, in the hospital, or in an assisted living or skilled nursing facility. It ensures that you get the information you need to manage your care or your loved one's health and care. So always important for everyone to have an advocate. Next slide. Thank you. So I hope I've been able to illustrate through examples and some case studies what the role of a geriatric care manager is, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, I'm gonna one of the questions that somebody said was, did you ever have a client that you were unable to assist? And if so, can you describe the details about why? And have you ever had to get APS, Adult Protective Services, involved in a case? And if so, can you describe?
Well, I'll answer the second part of that first. I did have a case where a woman in her 80s was living in a home that was, oh gosh, I couldn't even, hoarding is just not even the right description for it, because I don't really think it was hoarding. I think it was more that she was older and didn't have the ability to, clean her home anymore, go through the mail, throw things out. So when you walked into the home, and she was a smoker, so when you walked into the home reeked of cigarette smoke. There was stuff everywhere. And when I mean stuff, I mean dirty stuff. So stacks and stacks of newspapers and rotted food, mail, clothes, a poor cat who was terribly, terribly matted. I mean, it was just awful, absolutely awful. And for that particular case, yes, we did have to call APS, and with APS and with actually police and fire, which we had to call in as well because the woman was not willing to leave her home. But with the help of all of those different professionals, we were able to get her out of her house because it was a very, very unsafe situation. It was definitely a fire hazard and a health hazard. And now to go back to the first part of your question, can you just repeat that first part, Colin?
Yes, the first part, did you ever have a client that you were unable to assist? And if so, can you describe the details about why?
Yeah. I think, I mean, I actually gave an example of that particular case right now, and I'm not going to say I'm unable to help them. I'm going to say it's a work in progress. It's a very, very challenging case when you have difficult family dynamics. And, if there's one thing I've learned in life, you can't change people. And so it's a situation where you have siblings that are fighting, and there's money involved, which is always problematic. And so, in this particular case right now, I haven't been able to, I've been able to do certain things, but I haven't been able to change the family dynamic. And again, I don't think I'm going to be able to change it. I just think I have to work with what I have and remember that remember who the client is. The client is not necessarily the three children. The client is the older adult. So I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind.
Okay, so we got another question. Let me see, where did it go? Because I had it in front of me. Let's see. How does one pay for the services of a geriatric care manager?
So services are paid for privately. Sometimes if you have long-term care insurance, the services will be covered through the long-term care policy, but mostly it is private pay.
Okay, thank you. And somebody did ask, they missed the first half hour. We are recording the session. Because you missed the beginning, you missed that we are going to be posting it on the Boxwood Alliance website. At some point, it usually takes us several days to get it edited and up, but it will be posted now. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm going to give everybody another minute. Anybody wants to type anything, please let us know. In the meanwhile, while I'm giving everybody the chance to type any questions, I want to thank Naomi for presenting. That was excellent. And thank everybody that works with us at the Boxwood Alliance for helping us all to put this all together and get this rolling. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And it doesn't look like there is any more questions at this point. So I am going to assume that we're okay. I wish I could get this person who raised his hand to find out if he needs anything, but it doesn't look like I'm going to get there. So,
you can always email.
Yeah, I have a question. You can email Naomi. We did put the information in the chat box. You can also email info at at boxwood.org. I have to make sure I'm giving the right information, but we do have an email address on our website, which is theboxwood.org online. So you can certainly get us an email there if you need more information. So, okay, with that, I'm going to end the webinar. Thank you all. And I hope everybody has a nice evening. Stay warm, and we'll look forward to seeing hopefully a lot of you next month. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Colin.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.